Well, Pastor Jim is away today. He is actually ministering in Moldova in Europe today. So he sends his greetings. It is not going to be 68 degrees in Moldova today. It's going to be snowy and icy. And he sends his greetings and his prayers to us today. He is speaking to a group of pastors in Moldova at the invitation of a good friend of Central Assembly, Victor Pavlovsky. Some of you know Victor. And he invited Pastor Jim that God's doing just an amazing work among the Assembly of God Church in Moldova. And Pastor Jim is able to address a group of a couple hundred pastors in Moldova at a church conference there this week. So we're excited for him. We'll miss him today, but coming to minister today is another good friend of Central Assembly, Pastor John Alarid from Freedom City Church. We mentioned him as our missionary of the week. Yeah, it's great to have Pastor John. Hannah is with us today, baby Phoenix here on the front row. It's great to have their family with us. Freedom City, as you know, is our sister church. It's just about 5 blocks to our west. We're both here in Grant Beach neighborhood, and we get to partner together to do some ministry in the neighborhood together. In 2008, when he was in solitary confinement in prison, the Lord got a hold of Pastor John and called him into ministry and laid a burden on his heart to minister to prisoners and marginalized in the urban centers of America. And John founded Freedom City Church in 2016 with the specific goal to reach into Zone 1 in our community and specifically the Grant Beach neighborhood where we are together. Since its launch, Freedom City has grown. They're doing great. We've gotten to do some things with them, and they've also launched new campuses, one in Branson and one a prison campus at the Ozark Correctional Center right down the road on Highway 60. And he'd probably tell us a little bit more about that. At the end of our service today, we're going to receive a special offering to benefit Freedom City Church, some of the initiatives they have going just to kind of help them in their ministry. But first, would you please help me give a good Central Assembly welcome to our friend, Pastor John Alarid.
Well, it's an honor to be with you guys here this morning, and I'm grateful for the friendship, the mentorship of Pastor Jim Bradford, and the support of the pastoral team, Pastor Crystal, Pastor Carter, and this entire congregation really getting behind me and my wife and our team just down the street here at Freedom City Church. So we do appreciate you very much. It means a lot to us. And also we have the Hope Homes of the Ozarks, which is the recovery home that we started, is now partnered with Adult Teen Challenge. So now we're actually a Teen Challenge Center teaching the Teen Challenge curriculum. And so we are in need of teachers, shameless plug, for our Mondays and Tuesdays all day we have teachers. So if you're a teacher or a retired missionary or you just want to teach, we do have that available that you can teach Mondays and Tuesdays. And we have, in the foyer, I believe they have a booth out there with the sign-up sheets for that. And Pastor Jim has graciously accepted the invitation to be the vice president of Hope Homes of the Ozarks Adult Teen Challenge. So we do appreciate him for that. We also are in need of mentors. As you know, we've been partnering with mentors, and I know I'll be at Dr. Cotton's class in a few weeks with some of the team for an orientation about the mentorship program. And so at Freedom City Church, our lack is laborers, in stewarding the harvest that God is sending us. And so we're grateful for the partnership with Central Assembly of God to steward that harvest well. And I believe you can sign up for that in the back too, or talk to Pastor Carter. I can't remember who the liaison is for the mentor. Anthony Matrone, and so you can talk to him. Also, I have a few books here. Jacob, he's our men's home staff. Let's give it up for Jacob. Come on. And so he's doing a great job. He's got a couple books of My Prison Became a Palace, and then a couple books that I wrote called Pharmakeia. So My Prison Became a Palace is my autobiography. The book Pharmakeia is the connections between drugs and the demonic. Raise your hand if you would like a book, and he'll run around and give you a book. So there's hands going up all over the place. So this is a great partnership that we have going here. There's no competition. We're all on the same team to reach and transform our community with the love of Jesus Christ. Reach the lost and transform Zone 1 for the honor and glory of Jesus Christ. I want to ask my wife to come up here and greet everybody. Give her a big hand. Come on.
Good morning. Good morning. Oops, that's not right. Good morning, Central Assembly. Yeah, I'm used to saying something else. So I just want to say thank you guys for having us here. We want to honor Pastor Jim Bradford. You guys know that Pastor Jim is a man who loves Jesus so much that it shines through in everything he says and everything he does. So for such a man to trust my husband and us to be here is really such an honor. So we're privileged, and I just want to say once again how much we love working with Central Assembly, partnering with Central Assembly, because you guys know it says in John 13:35 that the world will know that we are his disciples by our love for each other. So what a beautiful testament it is to a ravaged community that has struggled for many years, to see two churches that are very different coming together for one purpose, one name. Amen. So thank you, Central Assembly, for having us this morning.
So Hannah is a graduate of the Long Island Teen Challenge. She was born and raised in Brooklyn, Flatbush, Brooklyn. And then she went through the Teen Challenge program and came down here to go to Central Bible College. And as soon as she saw me, she's like, I got to have that man for my husband. Tap your neighbor and say, favor ain't fair. She's the co-founder of Freedom City Church and also the creative arts pastor. She just put out an album called Overflow. An EP. I get those mixed up. It's an EP, so smaller than an album, they tell me. So, but it's amazing to see what God is doing just down the street here at Freedom City Church. And this March 6th will actually be 4 years since we launched Sunday services at the Assemblies of God Theological Seminary. So in 2019, we had 1,379 salvations at the campuses, at the three campuses, including the prison campus and also our prison and jail ministry, 292 water baptisms. We launched the Branson campus in 2019 with missionary associates Zach and Alicia Rogers. Zach also works here at Central Assembly, and they really need people to pray for them and to give to their U.S. missions account. At the end of 2019, we broke 600 in attendance at weekend services at all three campuses, and we want to go to 2 services at the Springfield campus this year. We have 55 beds for men and women getting out of prison and off drugs. I believe we have a few of our men's home here. Are they here? Go ahead. There they are. Go ahead and stand up if you're in the men's home. We have a few of the guys here. Come on. We also have Straight Street Inc., which is a group of sober living homes, which is a separate organization from the church and the Hope Homes. To provide sober living homes for people getting out of prison and off drugs. It's a different model. It's more like a halfway house, and at that facility you can be on psychotropic medication, and some people are mandated to medication out of prison, so we want an opportunity to reach everyone. At the Hope Homes, there's no medications. It's just Jesus in the morning. Come on. Beans and rice and Jesus Christ is what they used to tell me. So, but I love beans and rice, so it worked out perfect. But so far, the Lord has helped us, and we're grateful for what he has done through our lives and through this church. And you know, as I was thinking about what I should speak about this morning, you know what I mean? There was 2 ways I could go. And one was to just wax eloquent and just wow my former CBC and AGT professors with my, expository, my homiletical prowess. And then the other was just to tell my story and the story of Freedom City Church. And so I asked Pastor Jim, I said, what do you think? I got 2 ways to go here. And he goes, hey, tell your story. Tell what God's doing at Freedom City Church. And so that's what I'll be doing this morning. We believe that they overcame him, the devil, by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. And they did not love their lives so much that they were afraid to die. So we believe that testimony is a spiritual weapon against the enemy. Come on. And so at Freedom, that's a good place to clap. Go ahead and clap. Testimony is powerful. You know that we are the epistles. You know what I mean? We are the letters written with our lives that tell the world who Jesus is. And so, you know, for me, I love stories. Stories have impacted me. You know what I mean? When I read the stories of George Fox, of Duncan Campbell, of Evan Roberts, of William Seymour, and lives of great men and women throughout church history, it has impacted me even more than reading commentaries. But I'm a kind of a nerd, so I love reading commentaries. Like on my free time, I read commentaries. So I'm a little bit weird like that, but I love stories, autobiographies and biographies of what God has done in people's lives. And so I'm going to share my story and how God got us to where we are here today. You know, getting very close to 4 years of Freedom City Church. And I believe that God has called us here, sovereignly called us here to raise up a movement that will go across this nation and even around the world. And as I share my story, I'm going to tell some real highs and I'm going to tell some real lows. But I want to encourage people that I've had some amazing encounters with Jesus, and I've had some really low points in my life. But let me tell you something: most of my life has not been those high points. Most of my life as a believer has been, a long obedience in the same direction, to grasping to understand what God was saying and how He was leading me. So I grew up, my mom is here today. Go ahead and stand up, Mom, and just give a little wave. Mom and her sisters were the California girls, blonde hair, blue eyes, saved in the Jesus movement. They went to Elam Bible College. And my father was saved at the First Presbyterian Church in Monterrey, Mexico, and he also went to Elam Bible College, and they fell in love, the conservative Hispanic with the wild, crazy Jesus movement girls from, what did they used to call you guys? The California girl? Oh, the blondes? Okay. Las güeras? Okay, so, so then they went as missionaries to Latin America. So I grew up underneath the front row, you know what I mean, of church, passed out under the front row. And, and you got to understand, I grew up in Latin church. So in Latino churches, you haven't had church until you hit the 4-hour mark. Once you hit the 4-hour mark, that's really where things start to take up. So I talks to Pastor Carter, and he says, hey, as long as we're out of here by kickoff, you know what I mean, we're good this morning. So I appreciate you guys acclimating to my culture. Just kidding. So at 4 years old, my parents were back in California from the mission field, and we went to Disneyland, right? And at 4 years old, there I am, and the highlight of my whole time was at Disneyland at 4 years old, and I still remember this experience. But do you remember they had the little rifles that shoot light light comes out of the thing, and you knock over things in a saloon, right? There's one in Branson. But anyway, so at the Disneyland, you know what I mean, knocking those things down. And so I'm sitting there playing, and I guess my parents told me, let's go, we're going to Tom Sawyer Island. You know what I mean? And according to them, I was a very rebellious 4-year-old, and I said no. You know what I mean? Now I know where Brooklyn gets that. But anyway, I said no, and so they said, all right, and they left me there. You know what I mean? So nowadays, They would be in prison. Come on, somebody. But so they left me there. They were going to teach me a lesson and left me there without money to put in the little machine. So, very quickly, without money in it, there was no light coming out of the rifle, and it became very boring. And I backed up to a little grassy hill there, right behind, looking at that little shooting gallery game. And I felt the presence of God, and I asked Jesus to come into my life as only a 4-year-old kid can. I had seen altar calls, and I had an understanding, and I asked Jesus into my heart. And I felt the presence of God, and even though I forgot that experience for many years, it was brought back to me, and it's one of those memories that I hold on to. My parents were supported by John Osteen's ministry. I don't know if you guys remember John Osteen out of Houston. So one time we were back from the field, and we were at John Osteen's church, and I remember it was a round stage like this. I was just a kid, but it was a big round stage like this, and we were sitting off to the right, and I remember looking up, and I felt the presence of God, and it was like, everything became, it's hard to explain spiritual things in words, right? But anyway, and God said, one day you're going to do that. And I didn't even really understand what that meant at the time. But as a child, I also looked up to my uncles on my dad's side of the family that were involved with organized crime. And even though they went to prison, now and again, they had the big cars, they had the beautiful women and the big houses. And as a kid, I began to look up to that lifestyle. But I started drinking and smoking as a young man. But in my 10th grade, I was sent to New Mexico Military Institute in Roswell, New Mexico. Once I went into that school, I had structure. A very structured environment, and I began to thrive. You know what I mean? I made straight A's. I took the SAT and the ACTs, 1350 on the SAT, 27 on the ACT, and only took them once, and hung over for the ACT. But anyway, I began to thrive. I remember January 1990, I was on a furlough, to go. We went back to Albuquerque, and it was for my grandma's to see my grandma because for her birthday, and that was just a few days ago. My mom reminded me of it just a few days ago. It was my grandma's birthday in 1990, and I walked into her little house, and she would make tortillas. Agnes Maida Sanchez. She would make tortillas from scratch, corn tortillas, flour tortillas. From scratch, cooking them, flipping them with her hand. And I walked into the little house on the south side of Albuquerque that day, and she handed me a tortilla, fresh tortilla, hot off the stove, with some queso, come on, and a hatch green chili. Y'all don't know what you're missing until you've had that. But and I remember my grandma, she would always pray over us in Spanish and in tongues, but that day, as I walked out of her little adobe house, and I was headed back to the military school, she ran out to me and hugged me and whispered in my ear. She said, "Everybody thinks your brother's called to the ministry, but I know that you're called to the ministry. God's going to do great things through your life." And she was weeping and holding me as she told me this. And I thought, "Grandma, you're crazy. I don't like church. I don't even know if I believe in this religion of Christianity." You know what I mean? And I for sure ain't ever going to be a pastor. Come on, I've seen too much crazy stuff. I don't want any of that. You know what I mean? And but I went back, and I'll never forget that day, because several weeks later on Valentine's Day, my grandma passed away from cavernous angiomas, which is a disease that affects descendants of Spanish settlers in New Mexico. Anyway, she passed away on Valentine's Day. Jesus loved her so much. He wanted to bring her home with him for Valentine's. But my grandma believed in me before I ever saw anything like that in my life. And I'll never forget that last time that she spoke that to me, because she did pass away, and I was a pallbearer, and me and my cousins took my grandma's body, but we know that she's in heaven. And here's the interesting thing about her, is she used to open up her house to addicts and ex-convicts. So as a kid, we would go over to her house, and there'd be these old school Latino mobsters. People would parole to her house. I mean, she was actually ridiculed by some of the family. Here is a divorced woman opening up her house to all this riffraff, but she didn't care. She felt that God had called her to do that. And her house even burned down one time, and she hit the front page of the Albuquerque paper, and people heard she was opening her house to that demographic, and so they raised money and rebuilt her house. And so she was just an amazing lady. She was robbed, she was beaten. I mean, horrible things happened to her, but she was so dedicated to God. She was a Catholic before. When she was a Catholic, she would walk on her hands and knees to the basilica. So this woman was just sold out for God, you know what I mean? And once she, so when she became a on fire Pentecostal, she kept that same kind of just sold out for the cause type of attitude. And but later that year, from New Mexico Military Institute, in my senior year, actually, I would be dismissed from the New Mexico Military Institute we pulled a gun on some guys in town, and I got caught drinking, and so I got kicked out of New Mexico Military Institute and graduated from Manal High School, which is a private school in Albuquerque. And I still graduated the top of my class, 4.1, I think, because I had the honors classes, 4.1, and I got a full paid scholarship to the University of New Mexico called the Scholars Scholarship, and so full ride to the University of New Mexico. And I had wanted to go to the military school because I wanted to be a fighter pilot. Come on, somebody, because I grew up watching Top Gun. I wanted to be Maverick, and since that was now out of my grasp, I decided to go with something less exhilarating, and I would become an attorney like some of my uncles in New Mexico. And so I went for pre-law, political science pre-law to the University of New Mexico. And the second semester, I was busted cocaine trafficking. So at 19 years old, I got my first cocaine trafficking charge. At that point, my life really, I got out of jail, was fighting the charges. In my life, I started the downward spiral of heroin addiction, intravenous heroin addiction, smoking a quarter ounce of rock cocaine every 2 days, and lost 16 friends in a span of about 5 years, incarceration, and many overdoses. And then in 1998, I stabbed a guy outside of a 7-Eleven in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I just want to say, if you want to, I got the ebook. You can sign up out in the foyer, and if you send me your email, I'll give you a free download of my book, My Prison Became a Palace, just talking about my story, free for anyone, you know what I mean, that wants it. Or you can buy one, and for everyone you buy, we donate one. Come on, somebody. And so, but I stabbed a guy outside of a 7-Eleven, and I went on the run. I was already on the run from the parole officer, and I went on the run, and I went to Phoenix, and my intention was to go south into Mexico. I speak Spanish, so I figured I would go to Mexico and keep doing what I'm doing from that side of the border. And but when I got to Phoenix, I bumped across this little recovery home by the name of Victory Outreach. So it's out of Los Angeles, started by Sonny Arganzoni, who was saved under David Wilkerson's ministry. And so I went into this little program. My intention was not to find Jesus. My intention was not to have a spiritual awakening. My intention was to get off the drugs so I could stay on the run and continue to Mexico. But within the first few months, I had a radical encounter with Jesus Christ. And I realized that this same Jesus that my parents talked about, that my grandma talked about, he made himself real to me. And it was revolutionary because overnight my worldview changed. Overnight I stopped cussing, and right there, that's a miracle right there. If you do, my mom used to say, why is every other word you say the F word? And I'm like, what are you talking about? I thought I was toning it down for my mom, you know what I mean? But anyway, I know no one in here has ever cussed, so we don't got to worry about that. But January 1999, Men of Conviction conference. I'd been in the home a few months, and this is a conference for the recovery homes with Victory Outreach in Glorieta, New Mexico. And I remember being at that, the first night of the services, an evangelist by the name of Philip LaCrue was speaking, and the title of the message was God of Second Chances. I don't remember anything about the message, but I know at the end of the message, he had a altar call for those who felt called to full-time ministry. And so, and we had about 50 guys there from our recovery home in Phoenix, and all these guys were going forward, right? And I'm looking at these guys like, these guys ain't serious. These fools are still smoking cigarettes. They're passing notes to the women's home. Come on, which none of our guys do that. And so, so I thought these guys aren't serious. They're bad-mouthing the program. There's no way God called them. I was like, I'm not going up there. God, I said, I'm not going up there unless you speak to me. Of course, I was expecting, him not to speak to me. But as soon as I said that, the presence of God fell upon me, and I began to weep like a little baby. And I don't ever remember crying like that in my entire life. My brother would cried a lot, you know what I mean? But I really didn't. I cried, which is worse because I would push everything inside, and so it would come out sideways. But anyway, I got out of my seat and I walked down to that altar, and God is my witness. There was a mist, like a cloud at that altar. And this is 1990 Victory Outreach Men's Home Conference. They didn't have smoke machines. Come on, somebody. You know what I mean? But anyway, I saw a cloud with my natural eyes, saw a cloud. As I stepped into that cloud, I began to speak in tongues for the first time, and I spoke in tongues that entire weekend. And I do believe to this day that January of 1999 was when God not only called me to ministry, but empowered me for ministry. So I graduated that program. I told my pastor, Tony Garcia, I said, I feel called to ministry. So he said, go to the Urban Training Center, and so I went to downtown Los Angeles to the Urban Training Center for that ministry that I was affiliated with, and right there, 2 blocks away from the Staples Center. Come on, can I get a Go Lakers, somebody? This is called contextualizing the message, right? I'm not a 49ers fan, but come on, somebody. And so it might be okay here, but in my church, I could get beat up. I'm just saying. You know what I mean? There's just some locals over there that are crazy Chiefs fans. You know what I mean? And so it's not an option at my church to like anything else, but come on, go Chiefs, right? This is my city now. This is my state. And so, so we would go do street witnessing at the Urban Training Center. We would do plays, evangelistic plays, and go to the barrios and talk about Jesus. And they would wake us up, right? They would wake us up, after lights out, they would wake us up, and we would go street evangelizing, hop in the shuttle and go street evangelizing. This one night, we went to Skid Row. How many have been to Skid Row? How many have ever lived on Skid Row? Steve Pullis, really? I didn't know that. It's amazing what God's done. But anyway, so I went to Skid Row, and then we went to Santa Monica Pier. And on Santa Monica Pier, how many have ever been to Santa Monica Pier? Come on. And so I went to Santa Monica Pier. It was late at night. Everything was shut down. You know what I mean? Some people were playing guitars and worshiping, and I was walking on the pier, and I looked over, and I saw a little shooting gallery, just like the one from when I was 4 years old at Disneyland. And the Lord said to me, he said, do you remember when we first met? And I just broke into a million pieces and looked out at the Pacific Ocean and just wept because I forgot about God, but he never forgot about me. The following night, me and some of the students at the training center were in the living room at the facility there in downtown Los Angeles. I was listening to worship music on my headphones, and they were playing cards and watching Lord of the Rings. And of course, I was way too holy to watch Lord of the Rings. I just got out of a recovery home, radical encounter with Jesus. I didn't play cards or watch Lord of the Rings. Come on, somebody. You know what I mean? And so, but I was looking at the TV. It was on. They had the closed captioning on, and I felt the presence of God. And I looked up, and I saw words across the screen that said, "Do you remember when we first met?" on the screen. And I was like, what is going on? I thought I was imagining it. I thought it was a vision. But it was when Arwen, the half-elven, said to Aragon, "Do you remember when we first met?" Timing, right? And so, and I was like, it's amazing that God can even speak through this demonic show. God could do anything. And, a fantasy movie with demons and elves and gods and men, and so it wasn't until later when I took Luke Gibbs' C.S. Lewis class at Central Bible College that I found out that Lord of the Rings was written by J.R.R. Tolkien, who led the late, great C.S. Lewis to faith, and therefore all his works are sanctified and in the canon. So I got at the end of the training center, they said, hey, we want you to be on a missions team to go to Manila, the Philippines. You know what I mean? And I said, I told one of the pastors there, Victory Outreach has a lot of pastors that are former inmates and heroin addicts. And one of the pastors, I said, so I went into the men's home. I don't suggest doing this, but I went into the men's home under the name John Alvarez. My name's John Alarid. I went under John Alvarez because I was on the run. You know what I mean? And so, but then they're telling me to go to the mission field, and I'm thinking, hey, I don't know if I can fly out on my own passport. You know what I mean? And so I told the pastor, one of the pastors there, he had done a lot of years in San Quentin prison there. I said, I don't know if I'll be able to fly out on my own passport. I might have an open account of attempted murder out of Albuquerque, right? And he looked at me and said, you know what? When I came to Jesus, I had a stack of charges like that, But the Lord, blew them all away. And I was like, I claim that for me. You know what I mean? I'm going to name that, claim that. You know what I mean? It didn't work out that way. You know what I mean? But what happened was he encouraged me to follow God. I said, hey, give me some time to pray about it. And so I took a few weeks to pray. Me and my dad drove to Brownsville. My uncle lived in Brownsville. This is in 2000. My uncle lived in Brownsville, and we went to visit the Brownsville revival. And so we walked in there, and I mean, it was like, I felt something that at a different level than I'd ever felt before, in the presence of God in a tangible way, and walked in there, and I saw that God was using this ex-junkie by the name of Steve Hill. 4 million people started on Father's Day, 1995 to 2000. 4 million people came down there. When I saw that people would rush the altar calls to give their lives to Jesus, man, I was hooked. Man, there's nothing like seeing people give their lives to Jesus. I lived for that. And also while I was there, I'm there to hear a word from God. And I'm thinking, should I stay or should I go? Should I go to the Philippines? Should I stay in LA? Should I turn myself into the police? What should I do? You know what I mean? And while I'm there, a guy came up to me with one of those old cassette recorders, those handheld ones where you push the red record button. You know what I'm talking about? Right? Some of y'all youngsters don't know what a cassette tape is, but it's like a CD or a DVD that we used to use. He came up to me, right? And he had that tape recorder in his hand, and he pressed record, and he put it up to my face, and he said, God says go. You're not out of place. You're in place. This guy began to read my mail. He told me things in the past there's no way he could have known. He told me things in the future that would happen. He said, God has called you to the cities. You will prevail. There's a prince in the city and all this stuff. But all I heard was God says go. You know what I mean? Because I'm thinking, should I stay or should I go? Come on, somebody. How many know that old Clash song, should I stay or should I go? But, Steve Pullis, he's lived in Skid Row and he likes the Clash. And he's the youth pastor at Central. But so this guy tells me that, so I'm like, okay, that seems pretty clear, you know what I mean? And so I go back to LA and I said, okay, God says go. I got the cassette tape, you know what I mean? I still got that cassette tape, actually. So went out to the Philippines, flew out of my own passport. God began to move. I planted, while we were there, we bumped in, we were going to Bennigan's. So we were on the mission field. So you go to Bennigan's and eat some American food, like this is a really big deal, right? You know what I mean? So we went to Bennigan's and you know what I mean? We're splurging, you know what I mean? Probably spending $5, you know what I mean? And over there, but I went over there and we overheard some Americans talking. And we looked over, you know, when you're on the mission field and you hear people speaking American English, it's like, oh, my people, you know what I mean? And so it was Steve and Linda Long, and they were actually AG missionaries out there. They attend church here too. Where's Steve and Linda? Right there in the back. So I've known this couple for a long time. And so they ended up saying we wanted to go to Bible school. So we ended up going to their extension campus in Metro Manila. So our whole team went to Bible school there. And I mean, you got accredited transferable classes for like $3 for 3 credits, $1 a credit or something like that, right? And so you can't beat that. And so but anyway, our whole team went to there and to that school, and it was just a great time. Steve would come in and teach classes and speak at our churches, and ended up planning a church in Tondo, Manila, which Steve Long said, don't do it. People die there, foreigners get kidnapped. And I was like, Brother Steve, I feel like that's confirmation. I want to go where no one else wants to go. So we went, and but you know, when God's moving, messy stuff happens. You know that people are critical of the Brownsville revival and other revivals, but Proverbs 14:4 says, where there are no oxen, the manger is clean, but an abundant harvest comes from the strength of an ox. When God is moving and there is revival, you know what I mean? Many times it's going to be messy. I mean, we have people throwing crack pipes on the altar. You know what I mean? I don't even know, you know, how safe that is, but they're throwing crack pipes on the altar at Freedom City Church. Getting threats from pimps. I'm getting threats from people who their girlfriends now, they don't want to sleep with them anymore. And, you know, and it can get messy. Working with people and new believers, especially the demographic that we work with, can get messy. When God begins to move, you know what I mean, in revival power, things get messy. I remember I heard a quote that Evan Roberts said that after the revival ended in Wales, that he said, oh God, send the revival with all its messiness, just come back. And you know, how about you? I don't know about you, but I want to experience a move of God, and I believe we're going to experience a move of God in this generation. Come on. Two and a half years later, I came home, flew into LAX. I was going to speak at the World Conference for Victory Outreach. We were going to share a testimony of what God was doing in Manila, 40,000 people at the World Conference in Long Beach Stadium. I was going to be an evangelist for that ministry. I was a rising star in that denomination, and God was doing great things. My future looked bright. And I got to LAX, and there I was arrested on old charges for that stabbing out of Albuquerque, New Mexico. So I didn't even make it out of the airport. I was put incarcerated once again at the LA County Jail at they call it the Glass Towers. So there I am once again eating ramen noodles and pickle juice. Some of y'all aren't going to get that, but I bet the guys right here in this section, some of these guys will get that. You know what I mean? So ramen noodles and pickle juice is a big deal. In prison. But anyway, you know, after a few months, they said, you know what, we're going to, if New Mexico doesn't come for you tomorrow, we're going to cut you loose. So in my mind, I'm already thinking about the street tacos right down the street, carne asada, street tacos, elote, horchata, you know, like a block away from the jail. Y'all don't know nothing about that. But how many have ever had elote? The corn. And so, but anyway, so they knocked on my cell door the next day, and I thought I was going to be released, but they said, New Mexico's here for you. I was extradited back to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I was eventually released to fight the charges, and I was put on pretrial services. At this time, I'm facing 25 years in prison, and became discouraged and actually started drinking. It didn't start right away. I stopped praying. I stopped reading my Bible. I stopped doing my daily devotions. I stopped that conscious contact with God and through the Holy Spirit. And I began to just listen to K-Love on my way to sell insurance at the insurance company that I was working at. And how many know that won't hold you? Come on. Listening to the Christian radio station on the way to work does not count as devotional time. I don't want to step on anyone's toes right here. You know what I'm saying? But at least for me, that's how it was. That wasn't enough. But I was discouraged. I didn't have a community of faith. Lamentably, I started drinking. Within a week of drinking, I had a needle in my arm and was shooting up cocaine and heroin again and went on the run once again. And I would stay at a little cheap hotel in Albuquerque, New Mexico called the De Anza. And all night and all day I would be shooting up drugs, and I would sell drugs in the alley to support my habit. And during that time, the demonic realm was really opened up to me. You know what I mean? And I was so ashamed and broken for backsliding and turning my back on God. But during that season, in my drug-induced and demonically oppressed season of my life, I would see little demons running around me with voices of little children laughing at me. I would have sleep paralysis and be frozen to my bed with demons in my face. I would see shadow creatures going through the room, and sometimes I would leave my body and I would float around. And so these are all demonic experiences. You know what I mean? The people that have used hardcore drugs, 99% of them will say the same thing. How many in the men's home have ever experienced anything that I'm saying right here? And so because drugs open you up to the demonic realm. It's not, you don't even have to be in the occult. When you do drugs, it'll open you up to the demonic realm. The book Pharmakeia talks a lot about that, from Genesis to Revelation. Kind of talks a little bit about that. So during that time, you know what I mean? The enemy really began to lie to me, because the devil comes to steal, he comes to kill, and he comes to destroy. And the devil began to tell me, your life's a waste. You said you were a Christian, but you ain't nothing but a hypocrite. You hurt everybody who loves you. You hurt your mom. You hurt everybody who believes in you. You have a daughter that you've never even met. Your life's a waste, and you're going to prison for the rest of your life. Why don't you just kill yourself? And then during that time, I had a 45 Ruger underneath my bed that I kept for protection and paranoia. And I would grab that 45 Ruger and I would put that gun to my head, and I would want to blow my head off. But by the grace of God, I didn't pull that trigger. I was picked up a year later. I was sent to the jail and then on to the state prison. By the grace of God, only got 8 years, sentenced to 8 years, got to prison, and I was doing the same thing. We were bringing drugs in. We were doing that whole thing, and I was just getting high and doing the prison game. And then I got busted for suspicion of bringing narcotics into the facility, and I was transferred from a level 2 facility to a level 5. So I was in solitary confinement there for 5 months. And in my mind, I'm thinking they're going to bring street charges against me so I could get 20 more years added. 8-year habitual plus 12 years for bringing narcotics into a state facility. So I'm thinking they're going to try to get me with this or more. But right there in solitary confinement at the prison in Santa Fe, New Mexico, I got down on my knees and I said, Jesus, if you're still there, would you come back into my life? And let me tell you something, friend, it was like waves of electric liquid love that flowed over me for 5 months. My prison became a palace. My dungeon was filled with light. You know what I mean? I would literally quake under the power of God for that 5 months, and I could tell that I was being delivered of demons and being set free. And then I told God, God began to show me pictures of speaking in prisons, of speaking in churches, of speaking in stadiums. And I said, God, you got the wrong guy. I said, God, there's people that are more faithful. You know what I mean? I can't even be faithful to you. I don't want all that. I just want you back in my life. I just want your presence back in my life. And God spoke to me clearly from the parable of the 11th hour workers in Matthew chapter 20 in verse 15. And it said, don't I have the right to do what I want with my own things? And the way the Lord said that was just in such a way, so gently, that it just broke me down into a million pieces on that floor. And God restored the calling that he had in my life. Give it up for Audrey. She helps us with the kids, evangel student. And so but God began to restore my call, and after 5 months, I was released from solitary confinement. I was still on the line. I was in general population, so I'm still in prison. You know what I mean? But the rest of my time in prison, I lived for God. My dad paid for global university undergraduate courses. I did global university undergraduate courses in prison. I was voted in as the inmate pastor. God began to show up in that little inmate church. It would get packed out, you know what I mean? And people were walking in like, what's going on here, Coyote? Right? They call me Coyote because I'm half Norwegian and half Mexican, like a Viking Pancho Villa or something. You know what I mean? And so they would come in there and be like, what is going on here? What's that I feel? I said, that's the presence of God, homie. Sit down and get you some Jesus. And so it got so packed out, and there were prayer meetings in every cell block to the point that it became a security threat. So they thought I was starting a new gang, you know what I mean? And so they ended up moving me to other prisons, and God would move there. And by the time I exited the prison, the warden over the New Mexico Department of Corrections, the head guy, came and walked me out. And he said, since that last time in solitary confinement, you know what I mean? You've been an agent for good, you know what I mean? A model inmate. Come on. If you're going to be an inmate, you might as well be a model inmate, right? And so, you know, and he walked me out my last day in prison, you know what I mean? But when I was in solitary confinement on that little floor, thinking I might spend 20 extra years in prison, God began to speak to me about a move of the Spirit that was coming once again to the world. He began to speak to me about an army that he was raising up out of prisons and jails of the United States of America that would go across this land and preach the unadulterated gospel of Jesus Christ with signs and wonders following. Come on. Back on the line, I read a book, and it wasn't a Christian book. I don't even remember the book, but it said future world changers are found on college campuses and prison yards. And I knew that part of this army would include not just addicts and convicts, but people with education, with college students that weren't satisfied with business as usual, that wanted to get out there and do the stuff that they talk about in the Bible. And now at our church, you see that over half are ex-cons and addicts, and there's about 40%, you know what I mean, are college students or college educated, and which of course is a picture of me. I'm an ex-convict and an ex-addict, but I also, you know, have my master's degree from AGTS and pursuing a doctoral degree as soon as I can find time. And Dr. Jim Bradford suggested, said, why don't you need to write a book on what God's doing at Freedom City so you can recruit other leaders, you know what I mean? And he said, and you should use your doctoral program, you know what I mean, to help focus you to write that book. You know what I mean? And so I want to do that. It's just a matter of finding time. But you know, right there, after I got out of prison, I went up to I went up to Santa Fe. I cut off all my connections with the old people, you know, that I used to hang out with. And man, I was serious. I got into community college. I applied to Vanguard University and Southwestern University, and then I got supernaturally healed of hepatitis C, right? And so I ended up talking about that at a camp meeting in New Mexico, and an old pastor came up and said, why don't you go to Central Bible College? That was confirmed in several supernatural ways. So in 2011, I came up here to attend CBC, but if I hadn't have been healed, I was about to start the year-long treatment. If I hadn't have been healed of hepatitis C, I would not have come to Springfield, because by then we would have found out that CBC was closing. You know what I mean? But God, healed, documented healing, healed me. I was able to be released to come to Central Bible College. You know what I mean? And when I got to CBC, you know what I mean? I didn't know if I was going to be able to do it. I didn't know if I was going to be accepted by all these good kids, you know, but my fears were unwarranted, and I quickly acclimated to the culture and we started teaching everybody how to play handball. Come on. You know what I mean? And all I would do was hit the gym and play handball. Worked at Microtel as a night auditor on North Glenstone. You know what I mean? And did my classes, and then on weekends we would go street witnessing. So one weekend, you know, I had a little team that we went out and prayed for people downtown. And one day I'm outside the bistro. You know what I mean? We were taking a break, and I was posted up. Do you guys know what posted up means? So I was posted up outside the bistro. Let me give you an example. I was posted up outside the bistro, had shorts on and a tank top, and so shaved head like I used to have until my wife got a hold of me and taught me how to dress. And then, so notice today I do have a long sleeve on to hide the tattoos, and so I'm contextualizing the message also. You know what I mean? I don't want to be an offense to anyone. Oh, we marry the message, right? And we date the method. You know what I mean? But I don't know if that blew it if I just told you that. And now it's, but whatever. So, just forget I said that if it bothers you. And so, but she came up to me and she said, she came up to me and tried to get me saved. She's all, do you know Jesus? And I'm like, but I mean, I know what was really going on. Fellas, come on, are you with me? She was trying to get my digits. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, so she comes up and I'm like, no, I'm saved. In fact, I go to Bible college, at Central Bible College. She's like, really, me too? And I said, yeah. I said, I know. I sit behind you in AG history. Come on, somebody. And so the rest is history. 2013, graduated from CBC summa cum laude, right here at Central Assembly of God. Walked out. We got married in 2013. I started the master's program at AGTS. But I want to say this real quick. I know we're pushing the time, but you know what I mean? So I know this church isn't worried about time too much because y'all still have Sunday night services. Real Christians have Sunday night services also. Give me 5 more minutes. So Steve Hill died on March 9th, 2014, and we had moved across from CBC, and we lived at some duplexes right there across from CBC that was owned by the General Council. March 9th, 2014, Steve Hill died from the Brownsville revival, and I began to, that night I looked at Hannah and I said, who's going to weep over the loss like Steve Hill does? And as soon as I said that to her, the presence of God came upon me. I began to weep like a little baby. I fell off the bed, and I was in a fetal position, crying, weeping over the lost. And in groans and tears, my wife got down and just began to hold me. You know what I mean? Like, what is going on? And but I believe, and I don't want to mess with your theology, and if you don't believe in this type of stuff, that's okay. But I believe that a mantle that was on Steve Hill fell upon my life that day. And then, you know what, I ended up writing a church planting class at AGTS. So me and my wife never thought we would stay in Springfield. We thought we would plant churches in urban centers. She's from Brooklyn, I'm from LA and Albuquerque, but as we were here, I've been doing prison ministry since 2011. We began to see that North Springfield has some real inner city issues, and God began to draw our heart since 2014 real strong to plant a church here. In 2014, I wrote a prospectus on a hypothetical church plant right here in North Springfield that would emphasize the presence of God, would emphasize outreach and salvations. You know what I mean? That we would have recovery homes, that we would do outreach events. And I wrote this 50-page prospectus, you know what I mean? And in me, it wasn't just a prospectus, but it was a vision that God had given me. You know what I mean? In 2015, after working at Global University for 2 years, I worked at Global. Is Todd Wagner in here? Or the Wagners here? But oh, come on, somebody. And so that's his son. His son's much bigger than he is. So I worked there for 2 years and got half price at AGTS. Come on, somebody. And so, but anyway, I was quit in 2015, Cinco de Mayo of 2015. 15, I was set free from Global to go do what God had called me to do. We raised money. We started doing prayer meetings at my house. So on CBC, we used to pray for a move of God in this region, in this city, and for the lost. At Global, we did a weekly prayer meeting, and people would come from all over the city, like 5 to 6 guys. A few of those guys are still with us today. And we would pray for revival for the city of Springfield and surrounding areas, and for the lost. You know what I mean? And then we started doing that. We moved that prayer meeting to my house, and we began to pray. You know what I mean? At my house, we quickly outgrew the house. We went to the backyard. We had about 50 people coming to the backyard. We called it Friday Night Fire because we had a literal fire. Of course, the fire of the Holy Ghost. But, you know, I mean, we actually had a fire there, about 50 people showing up. We went to Pathways Methodist Church. They let us come in for free, and we started serving, you know what I mean, meal and a message, Friday Night Fire, as we still do today in Branson and in Springfield. And then in 2017, you know, we launched Today GTS Sunday services. The following year, January of 2017, it was a miracle, but we got owner financed the property at 1477 North Broadway, 25,000 square feet. We moved in there. We started the women's home. We started the Branson campus in 2017. In 2018, you know, the Bible says that the word of the Lord tested Joseph. Do you remember that? That the word of the Lord tested the dream that God had given Joseph, that he was in shackles, that he was in chains. Do you know that every vision for your life, watch this, every vision for your life, you know what I mean, will be tested. If God has given you a vision or a dream, I encourage you to not let go of it. It will be tested, but hold on to the dream that God will give you, because good is the enemy of God's great dream, right? Good is the enemy of that. In 2018, and some of the team knows this very well, but the organization that we were partnering with was accused of lots of things. And I was driving in Springfield one day, and God spoke to me. You know what I mean? And said, man, if God ever spoke to me, he spoke to me at this time. And he said, you are released from that organization and the leader of that organization. Because me, I'm loyal. So I'm loyal maybe to a fault. You know what I mean, at times. And so I had gone to bat for that organization, used all my influence, but God said, you're released. I called Superintendent Doug Clay, or texted him, and I said, hey, can I meet with you? I need some advice. And I went up to his office, he said, come by tomorrow. I went to his office, and I said, this is what God's speaking. He says, that's the word of the Lord, John. So we separated from that organization, and they kept a month of tithes and offerings, which for a church plant could kill you, right? And it would have killed us, you know what I mean? $30,000 we lost through that. And so we were praying and seeking God and crying out to God. God, you called us here. It looked like we were going to have to close down. I wasn't getting paid. We weren't getting paid. You know what I mean? I couldn't pay my mortgage, and they hadn't paid the mortgage on the church for several months. They hadn't paid the utilities, and so we were in dire straits. You know what I mean? And during that time, I got an offer, a very generous offer from some friends at a large church in southern Missouri. They said, come on, we'll make you a campus, and we'll give you 6-figure salary. You know what I mean? We'll fix up your building. We'll pay the building off. You know what I mean? And that sounds great, right? And I said, okay, let me pray about it. In my heart, I knew that wasn't the way to go. But now I have a family. We can't pay our bills. We can't pay our mortgage. And so during that time, and Pastor Carter walked with me through that time too. But during that time, I said, let me talk to Hannah. And I went and talked to Hannah. And if she would have said, let's do it, you know what I mean? Let's take the safe route. I would have done it. And I would have died to felt what God's personal vision and dream for my life was to support my family. And so I maybe wouldn't have liked it, but that's what I would have done, depending on what she said. And I was resolute in that. And I went and told her the real situation, and Hannah said, that would be selling out. She's like, shoot, we can move to an apartment. You know what I mean? She said, you can drive a scooter like you used to Global University. Come on, somebody. You guys remember the scooter? So she said, we can downgrade. And you know what I mean? I said, okay. You know what I mean? And so we stuck with it. You know what I mean? What God had called us to do. You know what I mean? I spoke at Central a month or so later, and you guys took up a huge offering for us that literally saved this church from collapsing. You know what I mean? Pastor Jim had my back, and people in the Assemblies of God got behind me and walked with me. That's why I'm sold out for this ministry. I agree with the doctrines, but for me, it's about the relationships and the people that have gotten beside me, and they've held me accountable, and they've encouraged me, and they've resourced me to fulfill God's dream for my life. And so we're just excited about what God has done, and you know, we believe that our vision is to rebuild and revive and restore broken communities, not only right here in North Springfield, but we believe that this is a movement that is going to be raised up to take back the urban centers of the United States of America for the honor and glory of Jesus Christ. 2020 is the year of strengthening the stakes. We're not starting anything new. We're strengthening the stakes. And I believe that God is raising us up, but we can't do it alone. I believe that God is raising us up, you know what I mean, to work together. What if we set out church planting teams made up of Central Assembly and Freedom City to go back and take back the urban centers of the United States of America? God is drawing a company of people together here at Freedom City and Central Assembly to lock arms and take this city back and to take these cities back. You know, some people believe that the Church of Jesus Christ is going to fade away into the annals of history, but I believe that the greatest hour of the Church of Jesus Christ is just in front of us. I believe that the greatest harvest is just in front of us. I believe that the greatest move of God is right in front of us. I believe that God is getting some holy dissatisfaction in people that are saying, we don't just want to do church, we want to see the lost found, we want to see cities transformed for the honor and glory of Jesus Christ. God bless you.